saw a werewolf with a Chinese menu in his hand.
The views and opinions expressed in this podcast do not necessarily reflect the view of Wolfpack Research or any of its officers. The views and opinions expressed by guests are their own, and their appearance on this program does not imply an endorsement of them or any entity they represent. We are not investment advisors. We hold no registrations with the SEC, FINRA, or any other regulatory agency, and none of the opinions expressed on this podcast should be considered investment advice. The listener should assume that we have positions in and stand to benefit from any stock or other security mentioned on this podcast. Do your own research before making investment decisions.
All right, welcome to the Wolf Den. This is Dan David. Thanks for joining us again. We're here with a little part of the pack. We just have Carl, our sound engineer. God help us all. We have a guest today that's going to talk about digital currencies and our ongoing quest to learn more, be informed about where currency's going, because digital is going to be a part of our future. That's my opinion, so I'm trying to figure it out. Today we have Sam Reynolds. Sam is a journalist with Blockworks, based in Taipei, so just right around the corner. Taipei, Taiwan. Blockworks is a financial media brand that delivers breaking news and premium insights about digital assets to millions of investors. So it seems like Sam's got to talk about her digital assets. He covers the intersection of digital assets and institutional investors and the world's most exciting economies. Prior to Blockworks, he was an editor with the Taipei-based Forecast News, where he covered how blockchain is disrupting enterprise and governments throughout Asia. Sam also contributes to WCCFT?
WCCF Tech.
WCCF Tech. You're going to have to explain what that is. One of the largest technology news websites in the world. Gee, I guess I missed that. And lastly, what brought him from Canada to Asia was his role as a market research analyst focusing on the gaming industry. So, thank you for joining us, Sam. What can you tell us that's new and exciting about digital assets and what we should be thinking in terms of digital assets? You're in Asia, so I think we want to know about the e-yuan or whatever they're calling it over there. It seems like it's government sponsored by China.
Yeah, Dan. Well, first of all, it's great to be here. And definitely, one of the most exciting topics these days is China's efforts to create a central bank digital currency. So we've heard a lot about this, or the CBDC. In the US, for instance, they're working on the digital dollar. But China's attempt at this is a lot different than what we have in the US, because, of course, the economy in China is a lot different and their policy has different mandates altogether. So, if you want to rewind slightly, the one key difference in China compared to the US is the huge love over there of mobile payments. So I don't know if you've been recently over to China, but the key thing you need right now.
Have I recently been over to China?
Yes.
I'm not invited. I'm invited not to go to China.
Well, perhaps that is a badge of honor, we'll say.
Okay. Sorry, go ahead.
One of the key things you'll need over there is not your credit card, not cash,
right,
but rather an app on your phone. There's two major ones. One is called WeChat Pay. The second is called Alipay. Mm-hmm. And these are effectively ubiquitous across the country.
Right. So, it is a true statement to kind of say, in general, that China skipped credit cards. I mean, they went, and they almost really skipped computers to a degree, like in-home computers, and just went straight to the phone for payments, credit cards, and computer.
Absolutely. So even beggars on the streets, they don't ask for change or money. They've got a QR code on their sign.
You're fucking shitting me.
That's insane.
You're kidding me.
Yeah. So a QR code, and they've skipped out.
You've seen a beggar on the street ask you or somebody to drop them a couple of QR codes.
Yes. So you scan your phone and give them a couple of RMB, and they can buy some Balchi or some steamed buns.
That is insane.
Wow.
Yeah.
High-tech begging.
So they can buy rocket fuel or some steamed buns. Have you ever had that, Bouchy? Oh, geez.
Or put the two together as well.
No, there you go.
Now, here's the thing. If you are a central banker, you'd be quite concerned about the amount of capital that is being used or put into these payment apps, right? So if you look at the supply of money, you have M0, which is cash, and then you have M2, which would be the commercial bank money, commercial bank loans. So for all the usage of Alipay and WeChat Pay, you've got a massive bulge right there. So you have these central bankers looking down at the supply of money in China and seeing that Alipay and WeChat Pay have a huge bulge in M2. So if we want to enact monetary policy, we have to filter through this. So there's less cash or M0, and now we have too much M2. Hence the need for a CBDC. So in this case, it would be a digital version of cash and not digitized currency like you have with Alipay and WeChat Pay, but also what you have with a credit card, debit card, or any other kind of digital payment device. Except the prevalence of those in the US or Canada or the EU is not as high as Alipay or WeChat Pay in China. So you have this monetary problem and now a solution for that.
So, and this is really, it's not Bitcoin, right? And it's not even based on blockchain technology or their own version of it. It's not actual blockchain, right?
No, neither. So initially in their early days of development, they used something called DLT. That is the distributed ledger technology. So that is more or less blockchain's cousin. But they've come out and said that while DLT, worked well in theory, it can't actually accommodate the scale required to serve, all of China and their 1.3 billion consumers. The second problem with that is if you look at DLT, the first word is decentralized. Having this decentralized would definitely not vibe with their monetary policy, which is all about control.
Right.
So unlike the US dollar, the pound, the yen, whatever,
that float.
Their currency does not float freely. Yeah. It's controlled centrally.
Yeah, so that's a problem. And blockchain technology in and of itself is a problem for them because they don't control it. Not controlling something for the China Communist Party is not an option. Having said that, they seem to be moving forward, I think, faster than we are, I would say, about adopting some kind of digital currency, about getting ahead of the curve, understanding blockchain, whether they use it or not, and the Bitcoin currencies. And we seem to be slow, I think, in that. I think you and I were talking at one point, and I would say that my view of this is that most people here still don't have a big interest in Bitcoin. It's the younger generation, and maybe the, people in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s, they'll just die off. But how do we get this knowledge to them? Because they need it too. I mean, look, Bitcoin's gone from, $4,000 a year or two ago to, what is it now, 50?
Well, certainly. Also, it's important to understand that, if you look at CBDCs, be it a Chinese, American, or British one, they aren't Bitcoin, right? It's a different kind of asset.
Right.
They're similar, but a lot different. Now, to your point, how do we capture that market of people who are not, millennials, who are not younger, to get them into, Bitcoin? So my, idea on that is try and replace their existing infrastructure. So things like their accounts for savings at banks with ones that are backed by digital assets. So right now, I bet your bank for a pure savings account pays what? Under 1%, 0.8, 0.5%?
I mean, look, I've had this discussion many times, so this will be, old hat to our listeners, but it's part of the wealth gap here in the United States, right? That banks used to pay interest, and lower income, underprivileged people, if they had any extra money, it goes in the bank, not the stock market. And that's still the way it is today. But not only do they not get interest, but it costs them money to have a bank account, even a savings account, right? With these minimum balances and these other fees. So, yeah, it doesn't pay shit, but I can guarantee you this much. When I open my accounts, there's a deal struck. I will pay no fucking fees a month, period.
Yeah.
For anything other than a wire transfer. And, that took me round and round, but most people do. So, yeah, you don't get anything from it. And this could also help the lower income, right? People that want to appreciate value and compound their money back like when they used to be able to.
Well, I won't endorse one service, but speaking of compound, you can go on Compound right now with your stable coins. So things like USDT, USDC, put in either $1, $1,000, $10,000 and start earning 6, 7, 8%. On Binance, they have their stable coin called BUSD. And right now, if you lock in your capital, again, be it $1 or $1,000 for 3 months, they'll pay you 7.5% or perhaps less, but 7% interest. Now, what does Bank of America pay or Citibank? They pay nothing.
By the time if they give you 0.5%, they'll charge you more than that in fees for the entire year. So, I think this. How do we get this informed to people? It's just not. There's no effort by our people pushing monetary policy, our government officials, anybody with fiduciary responsibility at these big institutions to say, look at the opportunity here between getting nothing and getting something in a safe environment. Is your money safe there, Sam? At Compound or what was the other one you mentioned?
Binance. Well, look, that's the thing, right? So it's not going to be insured by the FDIC or, stuff like that. But at the same time, though, these protocols have been around now for 2-3 years and they haven't collapsed yet.
Well, so, that's not a huge endorsement. That's not a very high bar, Sam. Quite frankly, I've been around for 52 and I haven't collapsed yet, but it could happen in any second.
That being said, though, what is stopping them from perhaps getting FDIC insurance? Well, the bank lobby.
Right.
The American Association of Bankers has a massive lobbying effort in DC that actively campaigns against things like stable coins, things like CBDCs.
Right.
So if you want to look at what's stopping the average person from accessing this new world of finance, it's this group right here. Right.
And on the weekends, they sacrifice children. That's very true. They're monsters.
Your words, not mine, but yes.
It's awful. The banking lobby is very, very strong and so much more intelligent than the average member of Congress. When I ran, the nightmare of a year that was, the one thing that struck me is being in Washington and, meeting with members and then meeting with any lobbyist in any field. They know vastly more than any one member of Congress, not just about what they're lobbying about, but about almost all issues, right? You're talking somebody that's, in charge of the confectionery lobby, right? So sugar's their thing and high fructose corn syrup. But I guarantee you, they know what's going on in banking too, more than a member of Congress does. They're the most informed people in town by far. It's a sad thing.
It's unfortunate, but it's reality because if you look at the funds available to this banking lobby, they're massive. So they can hire the best and brightest. They can definitely hire the top graduates.
It's unlimited. It's not just massive. It's unlimited.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but you had talked about, Dan, that it's the young people that are driving the Bitcoin, but I think it's also habit. Look at Apple Pay. 2-3 years ago, they only had 100 million users globally. I think it was a couple months ago they announced that they're at almost 400 million users globally. And it's not the 50, 60, 70-year-old that's using Apple Pay. That habit or that function is because of the smartphone. It's that younger person using it. So I think they're more inclined to look at cryptocurrency because they've become that habit of their hard currency from their smartphone. So now it's just, in their mind, an evolution.
Well, I think also it's about the lack of friction points. So with Apple Pay, you simply point your phone and it works. And also the convenience of not having your wallet with you all the time. So if you're out for a jog, for instance, you don't want to bring around your wallet plus your phone. You have your phone with you, and a simple tap can get you what you need. So I think if crypto finds ways to reduce those friction points, adoption will skyrocket.
I totally agree, but they're having the hardest time because of, let's all say it together, banking lobbies.
Yeah.
Right. Those friction points.
You have no faith.
Yeah.
Let's look at what happened with Anchorage Bank, right? So Anchorage Bank has a banking charter designed for digital asset banks. If you look at Wyoming, what's going on there? They've got a very strong movement to create these alternative banking charters and alternatives to LLCs that are crypto friendly.
Yeah, so, just it's really tough when you have to go to like the Bank of Butte, Montana, to do any kind of transactions. We're really hoping for, I don't know, little thing called Wells Fargo or Citibank or Merrill and these guys to really get on board.
Well, I would not agree, because when was the last time you stepped into a bank itself, right, to talk to a person?
It's been a while. I've said, listen, you're asking about this in the age of COVID. Prior to that, I mean, listen, there are some transactions that are bigger than others, and they want you to come in. But yeah, they don't want you there, and you don't want to be there. They're making everything online.
That's right. So for most retail banking customers, they actually interact with a bank teller face to face very rarely. Most things can be done over the phone or via an app. So actually, if you do have an obscure Bank of Beaumont, that's actually okay, because do you actually need a bank? No. I mean, you might need cash. So you simply have, with your cards, access to XYZ ATMs. Mm-hmm. And then you have your apps and your credit cards, what have you. So I think now people rely on the actual bank presence physically a lot less than they did 5 or 10 years ago.
That's true. So where do you think this goes? I mean, tell us what this looks like. Tell us what this looks like in a year, in 5 years, and in 10 years for both digital currency, well, all three, and Bitcoin, and hard currency, the M0. I mean, which we don't have enough of on the planet, by the way, because $3.5 trillion stacked on top of each other will take you to the moon. And we owe 30 trillion in debt. So how do you print all that money? You don't.
Well, for that reason, I'm actually skeptical about the need for a US CBDC without just that, printing money. So I had dinner over Christmas with an uncle of mine who was a ex-politician and former finance guy. And he's a bit older, and I tried to explain to him the idea of CBDCs. He said, "Sam, that sounds like printing money. Governments love that, but it's not good for the economy." Now, that being said, though, in China, there's a different motive for this. So right now in Vancouver, we have the CFO of Huawei under house arrest because allegedly she used US dollars to do business with Iran.
Right.
So you had a Chinese executive with a Hong Kong bank dealing with an Iranian company, but using US dollars. So when you use Uncle Sam's currency, there are rules. At the same time, though, do you think Beijing likes the fact that one of their star companies has to capitulate and abide by US rules because of a deal that had no US nexus? No, not at all. So I think in that case, in China, there's going to be a strong push to develop a CBDC so they can have a trade bloc that is non-US dollar denominated. Right. So it's to their annoyance that, in Cambodia, one of their proxy states, they use the US dollar as a de facto currency, not the Cambodian riel. So that's going to change. And around the world, we just see the US dollar being used because it's so liquid.
Right.
So
the yuan is, that whole idea that would, replace the dollar, at least regionally in some places at first. You think it goes to the digital currency, is how they get around or replace the dollar. And I mean, let's face it, I forget her name at Huawei, but I mean, she's a government official. It's not a private company. Huawei's the government. So yeah, they're really pissed that a high-ranking member of their government is being held in Canada and possibly going to be extradited to the United States just for using U.S. currency, dealing with a country, Iran, that China's fine with dealing with. I mean, they have a relationship with them. So yeah, they're really trying to get away from the dollar, and so is Russia.
That's right. Now, China has said that to calm things down with, trade disputes, that they're not looking to replace the U.S. dollar by any means. However, they'll provide an alternative to this.
Doesn't that mean the same thing?
Well, I mean, if you look at politicians speak and a bit of, illegalese here and there, they want to make things nice. But in their, in Africa, for instance, right, where they rely on now for things like resources, oil, gold, they want deals done in digital currency, digital RMB, not in US dollars. That being said, though, if you look at the US, there is a lack of incentive to replace the US dollar with a digital dollar because there's just not right now that killer app for it. I mean, yes, you might get wire transfers to be a bit faster. That is well and good. Yes, you will find efficiencies for delivering stimulus, but I don't really see that same need. I mean, that being said, though, I do see developments in second-tier countries, with their currencies. For instance, in Sweden, the krona has been targeted by their bank as a new pilot for CBDC. Likewise, in Thailand, the same thing. So these are countries that don't really want to be regional hegemons, but are still in their areas power brokers. So I'm sure that in Thailand, they would like it if you are a businessman in Bangkok dealing with a person in, say, Laos, and you do that deal in Thai baht, the CBDC, and not US dollars.
Yeah.
So I see that really as the immediate, 1 to 5 year outcomes. You have China and other countries developing CBDCs, but not the US.
Do you think that's a mistake on our part, or do you just you're sticking by, well, we don't really need to? I mean, why would we want to be the last one to do something?
Yes, but given the US dollar's role in the economy, you have to wait to get it right. You could rush this and get it wrong and have this be a real boondoggle, or you can wait and get it right. So right now, honestly, I see the digital dollar efforts as more of a lobbying deal with Accenture, who's involved in one of the projects, than an actual viable alternative. Because look at this, in the last year, look at the amount of stimulus dollars dispatched around the US. Huge. And for the most part, that was done pretty efficiently. I mean, no one complained about it.
Take you to the moon and back, right? I mean, $7 trillion.
Yeah.
It is a massive, massive amount of money that is unthinkable in physical form, number one. Number two, just the interest on, which is the reason we can't raise interest rates, right? Because we owe that money to ourselves. Like people will say, like, hey, we just won't pay China back. Well, who we're not paying back is ourselves. We borrowed this money from ourselves, unfunded pension liability, Social Security, other things of that nature that is debt to us. So we can't raise interest because we can't afford to with that amount of massive debt.
That's the joy of modern monetary theory, MMT, is that you actually just owe it to yourself, and do not pay it back, well, you put yourself in debt.
Right. Yeah. Well, you're not paying it back to seniors who put into it, right? I mean, it's definitely not going to be at this point somebody that's 18 or 19 that's put that much into, what's been borrowed. It's us. And to not pay it back means many, many less benefits, right? To start to pay it back would be great because then interest rates could go up. But literally, if we're at 3% interest rate, what are we talking about? $900 billion a year in debt service? That's more than we spend on our military.
Well, the solution, I guess, if you're the Biden White House, is to tax the crap out of capital gains.
That seems to be what they're pushing.
But that just simply moves that activity offshore, right? So if venture capitalists see this punitive tax on capital gains, they're going to say, okay, guys, let's recamp in Singapore and we'll start things up there. So that means the Silicon Valley is dead, right? Any kind of high risk technology venture is dead. The only reason why people risk their capital with VCs, and most VC projects fail, is that you can get a huge return for that one project, a moonshot.
Lotto ticket, yeah.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if you hit 1 out of 5, you're still doing fantastic. But that seems to be what's kind of being talked about right now, is taking capital gains from 20% to, raising the rate back from 37 to 39.6 or whatever it is, 39.8, and taking capital gains for people who make over $1 million a year completely away, taxing it at the top rate of 39.8. That, I mean, when you have so much money in the market and so many people attached to it, that's going to be really, really tough to see. And listen, I'm agnostic, just telling you from my point of view. I was the same way on Obamacare or whatever. Fine. It cost me a lot more money because everything that got charged more and, because of that bill kind of hit my bottom line. But I was like, fine. If everybody gets health care and everybody's healthy and they'll be taken care of, fine by me, I'll pay more. Only that didn't happen. And that becomes the problem with our citizens, right? You want more money. I'm willing to give it, but fix the damn problem. And then they don't. And that's why we don't want to pay more, because it's just really tax and spend, and nobody ever cuts anything.
Well, there are two things in life that are quite mobile. One, people, the best and brightest, and two, capital.
Yeah.
So people will just regroup offshore.
Yeah.
Secondly, people who do have lots of capital they can gain from never actually sell it. They only get loans against it.
Right.
So in the last 2 or 3 years, we've seen a large industry pop up of services where you can get loans against your crypto holdings. So if you don't want to cash out of your Bitcoin or whatever, you can get a loan against that and, not pay immediately the capital gains tax, but have access to that liquid dollar.
Now, who's doing this?
There are a lot of companies out there doing that. They pretty much offer the same thing, which is you can lock in your crypto into an account and take out US dollars against that. You pay between 2 to 5% interest, but you get those dollars at the end of that, right? So in that case,
non-taxed, right? Because you haven't.
It's not.
Yeah, you haven't cashed it out, right? Yeah.
So here's the thing. Let's say that you did well in crypto and you want to take that out to say invest further, like invest in a startup, invest in equities, or buy a house. The problem is when you take it out, that is taxed right there. So it's quite inefficient to have that point of pain, because that means less money to go elsewhere in the economy.
Right. So you're borrowing against one asset to buy another.
That's correct. But I think the point is, whenever you put up, a wall, or whenever you find a way to restrict something, there's always a loophole, not a loophole, but, a way around it.
Right.
Right. So with, this proposed capital gains tax increase, well prepared to see ways around this.
Oh, they definitely will. They definitely will. I mean, that's the problem with millionaires and multimillionaires. They tend to have people in their sphere of life that can tell them how to get around these problems,
Smart
and they can afford that, right? Yeah. When you have money, that's the way it is. So we're really not solving, the equity gap between the rich and poor in this country, which needs to be addressed in a real way, not just a political pandering way.
I think you're also going to see exodus from California, from New York. Their combined rates, if they do that, will be over 50%.
I don't go a week without hearing about a business in California, like major businesses that are moving out. I just heard yesterday, I was talking to somebody, and they maybe think that I have an interest or an idea that I would care about anything to do with Roth capital. I don't. But even those guys are moving to Miami, I hear.
Really?
Yeah. So, like, it doesn't make sense to have an investment bank in California paying those taxes, dealing with that bullshit, right? So you go to Miami.
What's the point of California, right? Like, if this goes through in California, your combined rate plus capital gains tax will be more than Canada, but you get no health care and, a high crime rate.
Yeah.
What's the point?
Yeah. And if you happen to be in San Francisco, it's still legal to shit in the street.
Oh, God.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is.
It's not even...
Remember the guy that was just pissing in the street right next to the cop? It's legal. You can't do anything about it. But let me tell you something. If you spark up a cigarette, they will beat you down and throw the jail on top of you.
It's the great irony of the left coast.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, look, I think it's interesting when you think back 5 or 10 years, and anybody listening, like, Bitcoin is a fad, a digital currency, whatever. Nobody's ever going to challenge the dollar. Every one of those things is wrong. That is just wrong. And all the people were saying it, especially investment bankers, they were saying that Bitcoin is a fad. They had people working at their bank specializing in Bitcoin understanding it. At the time, they were saying that it's not going to work out. And they still do. So, yeah, there are barriers. I think Bitcoin and the altcoins and Ethereum and everything else, it's still very clunky to just get in, buy it, and understand what you have and where it is. As those barriers start to come down through demand, as these 20-year-olds are becoming 30 and they like that lifestyle with the digital currency Bitcoin, and then 40, it's going to be part of the future. So you can get on it now or get on it when it costs more.
Well, didn't Mr. Diamond say that if he catches any of his employees trading Bitcoin, you get a firing slip? That's end of you.
Except for the division of people he had specializing in Bitcoin at the time.
Yes, of course. Now, of course, fast forward to 2021, and just like every other major private wealth bank, they are offering their clients Bitcoin and crypto exposure. Yeah. I mean, the sick irony of everything is that what was once forbidden and would result in firing or account closure is now mainstream. Well,
look, he's a lying shithead, and he always has been. So, I mean, that doesn't surprise anybody here. I loved his testimony when he was AOC was giving him the what for, and she was, look, prepared remarks. She can be pretty on top of it, and I loved how she was just taking it to him about his salary versus the average person hundreds of times, right? And I'm just waiting. Oh, what's he going to say about this one? This is not going to be good. He simply leans into the mic and says, "I don't set my salary; the board does." And AOC didn't know where to go with that, which I think is a good setup for, yeah, exactly. And what are they called? An independent board of directors? Only they're not independent. None of them are anymore. Corporate governance is gone. These guys are professional board members, and they get, maybe 50, 100 grand a year, which is nothing. It's the options that they get a year for being on that board. They're not going to lose it by not giving Jamie a nice big salary. And any other bank CEO or president as well goes for the same thing. That is something Congress could really affect. I would say, Sam, I don't know if you agree, that corporate governance and truly independent board of directors just doesn't seem to exist anymore.
I mean, yes, that's one thing that has to be looked at is the people that apparently govern these corporations. Who do they respond to? Do they respond to the shareholders? Do they respond to the executives or the public as a whole?
Well, the independent board of directors is supposed to be representing on behalf of the shareholder, but they don't.
Right. Yes. But now, should they be looking at interest of shareholders or stakeholders? I do not like AOC's politics that much, but I will say that she does have a point occasionally with stuff like this.
Yeah. Which one? When did she have a point occasionally? Tell me.
Well, I mean,
about the pay gap? Yes. Yeah. Look, it just falls into rhetoric, though. I mean, yeah.
It's posturing.
Listen, I don't want to get too far off on a tangent here, but it's like when I think we all want a cleaner planet. If you don't,
Yeah,
you're just a fucking shithead. But when you say it's all or nothing in 5 years or 10 years, it's a revolution, not an evolution. Well, then nothing gets done. Like, I'll take something today, not as good as I want, not as much as I want, but something cleaner today. And let's talk about compounding again, right? And compound on that and get better. And I think we're starting to do a little bit of that. And I mean, I think it would be really cool since, it's green, we're cleaning the planet. Maybe we do that with digital currency. Like, it's a whole kind of new method of doing things, not having to use money. I don't know. I mean, if we're going to do things different, let's do it different.
Well, I think that a very productive theme in politics is looking at how the elite protects itself, looking at how CEOs have their board that ensures that they have a great salary, but also then how their lobbyists ensure that investors who aren't accredited can't access the most exciting, stocks and ways to invest.
Yeah.
Because if you aren't accredited, you can't, with some exceptions, invest in startups, right? You don't have access to be able to buy equity in companies that will have that 10, 20, 100x return.
You're talking private equity?
Yes. I mean, yes, there are certain ways that you can actually do this, right? With like Reg D and Reg CF.
Yeah.
But those only are a small percentage of the broader investments that the elite have access to, but other folks can't.
Yeah. I mean, do you believe, I guess one of the essential questions I was going to ask you that I think is important. Do you believe that digital currencies and alternative currencies will level the playing field a bit between the haves and the have-nots? Or is it just going to be a different kind of have and have-not?
Well, I mean, look, there's always going to be inequality, right? We'll always see those haves and haves not. But I think that the broader digital asset ecosystem will give access to things like higher interest rates for savings accounts to people that can only usually get the piss poor 0.5% from their local bank. So that will definitely help close that gap, right? It's much more fair if you can have access to those higher returns. Again, with things like DeFi, right? Things like liquidity provider tokens, you can start with some knowledge and experience, getting some real returns, from your capital that you won't get anywhere except for those things, buying into a hot new startup, stuff like that.
Yeah.
So look, there will always be this inequality. And in some ways, I think crypto has made the gulf wider. At the same time, it allows people to catch up, right? It allows them to get that extra point for interest, or more than extra, like a few points, and allows them to build wealth and build capital, while at the same time, there are those that are so good they can make God knows how much percentage.
No.
That being said, though, all the crypto elites I've spoken with, I know, right, are not as arrogant. They're more down to earth than the likes of those ones on Wall Street. For instance, Sam Bankman-Fried of FTX, the founder and CEO, he's a dude that is worth, $5 billion, how much it is. But he also sleeps at the office on beanbag chairs, right?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what that means. I think that makes him douchey. I don't know if that makes him any more or less arrogant. I mean, it's like, you had to hear about Jack Dorsey 5 years ago that he wakes up every morning and takes a bath in ice. I don't give a fuck, right? It's just, what service are you providing to people, that is fair and needed? Yeah, these guys they're all quirky, right? And that gets them a little more time with journalists like you. Like, look, this guy in the beanbag chair.
Well, I will say that FTX has provided a lot of value in creating, a new marketplace.
That matters.
Whereas Jack Dorsey has created just poison that has ruined political discourse.
Yeah. I think that if FTX is creating value for people and an opportunity, then that's more important than the beanbag thing. I remember I was working on a short, I believe it was GTT, Global Technologies, who are bankrupt now 2 years later. But as I was talking to a former employee, this former employee is like, oh, the CEO, this Calder guy, he is so sharp, so smart. He knows exactly what he's doing. They're probably not taking on too much debt like you're lending me to think you believe. And I'm like, what makes you think he's so sharp? Every time I met with him, he used a pencil.
What?
A pencil. He took notes in pencil with an eraser. I'm like, okay. Thank you. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Like, I mean, like, it means nothing. Yeah. It turns out, like, you know, they were still a shitty company. And, you know, Dorsey taking an ice bath means nothing. He's either a good or a bad person. Same thing with FTX guy and his beanbag chair. But, like, look, I think this is great. I want to do more of this. I would like to know from your perspective, and I know you got to be careful because you're a journalist, but there are some great opportunities we know about in digital currency, Bitcoin, and then there's some real crap out there too. And that's what people are afraid of. Can you speak to in any way what maybe people should be more mindful of, stay away from, or, you know, an outright fraud?
Well, yeah. So the important thing always is do your own research, right? So here's some key things to look for when looking at a crypto project. First of all, look at how much capital is locked into the project. So you can have tools, for instance, like DeFi Pulse and, you know, other kinds of data repositories where you can see, you know, is it a project that has a few $1,000s, a few $1 million, or a few $1 billion. It's quite likely that should the project have a lot of capital in it, it's not going to be a scam, perhaps, you know, not ever, but, you know, less likely. Secondly, of course, you know, just look around at what the community says. I mean, you know, don't look on Reddit because they're just idiots that try and game, you know, machine learning algorithms that look for sentiment. Do things that look at different investors, what they're saying. You know, there are some great, really savvy investors out there that have done their due diligence on projects. For instance, there's Matthew Graham with a firm called Sino Global Capital. They're based actually in China. And he does on his projects fantastic research and due diligence. And often they will tweet out their investment thesis on that. So, of course, that's not saying you should invest based upon their word only, but they would have a pretty informed take on the project. So yeah, so look at the capital locked in, look at what the big guys are saying, the big investors, and then just look around at the different reports for research out there, like Mizrahi or other firms like that. So,
well, look, I've never heard of some of these firms. Not that I should, but you know, I think maybe others haven't either. So, you know, where do they go to start to get knowledge on this? I mean, do they read your column? There are other columns like that. I mean, like, where do you find these names to follow?
Well, of course, on Blockworks, we do have just the best news you can use. But no, I mean, there is a very broad ecosystem out there of, news sources that have this digital assets, you know, / crypto theme to them. So, of course, you can look at, you know, CoinDesk, you can look at Decrypt, you can look at, Forecast News. These are all great sources.
Okay,
and,
good.
You know, the first step is to build up your own domain knowledge. Right? Like, don't start investing your money without knowing the difference between DeFi, liquidity provider tokens, things like, things like what Solana versus Ethereum is. If you go in cold like that, you're going to get wrecked. All right. So do your research, play it safe, look for trusted news sources and investors to follow.
Elon Musk. So everybody should buy Dogecoin.
Maybe not Elon Musk.
Okay.
Yeah. So first of all,
Mark Cuban. Yeah.
Elon Musk, he likes to make memes, and that's all good and fun. But as someone to follow for material investment advice, no, thank you. Yeah. And secondly, stay away from people that have names like Crypto Bitlord or FX Hedgers or something, right? So generally speaking, if you have a pseudonym out there and like a cat avatar on Twitter,
yeah,
you probably aren't a reliable source of advice.
What about a wolf avatar? What about a wolf coin? Are those okay?
Now, wolf coins, Doge coins, they're all good fun, but
Well,
it's something to punt around.
I guess I won't have my own coin then.
We were doing a SPAC anyway.
Yeah, we're doing. That's
there
right.
you go.
We're
Yes.
doing wolf SPAC.
When in doubt, go for the SPAC.
That's right.
Yeah, that is the way to go. And I'm going to have, Chamath advise me, because when you
Yes.
have SPAC Jesus on your side, you can't go wrong.
Yes, when he's not posting thirst traps on Twitter of no shirtless and no clothes on.
I know. If I have not called Chamath a douche today, you're a douche, Chamath. You and Jeff Ubben. I don't really care if you think you're saving the planet. I don't agree.
I was watching CNBC one day, and they pretty much turned it over to him.
He was the
anchor, he was the host.
Yeah, they're not going to do that again. You know who actually gave him a little bit of a hard time that day was Andrew Ross Sorkin, who generally I wouldn't expect that to come from him. I think it was probably all over what's his name's head, Joe Kernan.
Yeah.
But they actually brought up, okay, at some point, Chamath, are you going to tell us how much money you stand to make on how much you put in? Were you watching the same episode where he's like,
Yes.
I put in over $100 million or whatever. And they were like, isn't that you and several other investors? It's not all your money. Oh, well, yeah. Well, I'm participating. It's ridiculous. And now he's out of Virgin Galactic, right?
Yeah.
You're just like, gone.
Well, when you're an influencer like that, I guess you don't have the hard questions sent your way. You can just say,
Well, then he did get interviewed on CNBC by I forget who it was.
He gave him a hard time.
But Chamath did not do so well on the GameStop tweets where he's kind of pumping that. Sam, you're a really smart guy with this stuff, really level-headed. We seem to agree on who all the douches are. I like that. What else would you add for our first show? Maybe the first of a few conversations. What have we not talked about? What should I know? What should our listeners know?
Well, look, here's the thing. Despite what bank lobbyists want you to believe, digital assets are real and they are revolutionizing retail banking. So just wait and see what happens. I mean, we will see a lot of very unique things occur this year. It'll be quite exciting, and it'll be a really, whole new world.
Well, like what? Don't tease us like that.
Well,
what's going to happen this year is going to be unique and exciting.
Okay, so having these digital asset bank charters is quite something. So I mentioned earlier, there are services where you can, put your stable coins into a savings account and collect some pretty awesome interest on that. Now that means you have to, go out and buy at the market, that kind of stuff. You have friction points like wire transfers, so on and so forth. With these banks, that will be native in your app. So you want to get people involved in this. Well, have, as we talked about earlier with Apple Pay, less friction points. So instead of screwing around with wire transfers and buying your USDT or whatever we want for stable coins, it's all in the app and it's seamless. The plumbing works. So stuff like that, will be the next big advancement we see this year. And for the retail investor, will definitely revolutionize things.
Well, the retail investor is definitely doing something. They're, it is in a way, I agree, a revolution. I hope it's not going to be a true rebellion when we get a 20, 30, 40%, 20, 30% pullback. And then any more than that's a recession or a depression. But it's going to pull back. And I think some of these retail guys are going to get really, really hurt. And diversification, I've always found in a situation like that's very key. I used to say 33% real estate, 33% stock market, 33% in your venture capital, meaning you own your own business or something. Now you could add digital currency to that. You could add Bitcoin to that as a part of diversifying. Maybe not as high as the others, but maybe have some of it, right?
Well, yes. So in Canada, on the TSX in Toronto, we've seen almost half a dozen Bitcoin ETFs launch to great success. And it's made the ETF sector up in Canada the hottest it's been ever, right? So that's showing that this works and we can have crypto-based ETFs. And the SEC and the authorities in the U.S., are on notice. They have to do this.
Yeah, they do. Very exciting stuff. And I really appreciate you coming on, Sam. I think we'd like to have you on in the future, especially like if we do other shows with Bitcoin and we have somebody on here that you like or that you don't like and like to hear about it. It doesn't mean you have to come on the show and tell me, but give me a call and let me know. Unless we want this to get more fluid for our audience, because quite frankly, a lot of our audience are just kind of like affluent investors who are, either taking big long positions or short sellers, people who are wanting to be day traders and shorting. But Bitcoin should be a part of our nexus as well. Any questions for you, Carl? Good. Thank you. You were very interesting today. We learned from Carl that the penny costs more to make than it's worth. That is a metaphor for Carl. It really is. Thanks for joining us. If you like this episode, give us a retweet, leave us a comment. You can follow Sam at Sam. This is where you jump in.
Yes, on Twitter at the Sam Reynolds, or my work on blockworks.co.
And how often do you publish an article? Are you an article a day, a week, or?
Usually every day.
Really?
So come on by. It's a very busy world.
It's a beast.
Wow. Why are you in Taipei, by the way?
Well, so Asia is a huge, focal point for digital assets.
Yeah.
And if you look at Taiwan, it's a great low cost and also safe, unlike Hong Kong, place to cover the region. So
for now.
Yes. Well, I think it's going to be safe for a while, but we can cover Hong Kong without being arrested under the
for at least the next month
security law, and cover Singapore without paying Singapore real estate rental fees.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's good times.
Well, listen, I'm a big Taiwan fan, but don't get too attached. It's
okay.
It's not going to end well.
All right. Sounds good. All right.
Thanks for joining us, Sam. And to our listeners, thanks for listening. If you like what you heard, leave us a comment, give us a retweet, follow us on Twitter. Thanks for joining us.
If you hear him howling around your kitchen door, you better not